as it goes.
Sorry.
So welcome to All Things Aviation, the final episode for 2020. What a heck of a year we have had. And our focus today is on expanding the diversity envelope in aviation and aerospace. Have some really great guests on today, and we've been having some technical issues, so this is going to kind of just go with the flow. But you know, all of us in the technical world, whether it's as a pilot or whatever, we're used to making the adjustment on the fly, so to speak. I'll start out with introducing our guest. Our first guest who just joined us coming out of a meeting is Lieutenant Commander LaShonda Holmes. Lieutenant Commander Holmes is currently a U.S. Coast Guard Senate liaison. Prior to that, she was a she was a MH-65 Dolphin helicopter pilot for at the Coast Guard station in Miami, Florida, which happens to be one of the Coast Guard's busiest air stations in the country. We also have Carl Conliffe. Well, let me back up and just say welcome, Lieutenant Commander. Great to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you here. We also have Carl Conliffe. Carl and I go way back a couple of decades, but Carl is currently the project manager for the Eagle 3 Common Satellite Testbed product line. Say that 5 times real fast. At Northrop Grumman Space Systems in Redondo Beach, California. You guys got some good sun out there while we're shoveling snow?
Overcast today.
Oh, it's overcast?
Yeah.
Oh, darn. No, I'm just kidding. In his role, Carl manages a multidiscipline team of engineers that builds test beds for multiple satellite programs. It's so much that he does, I can't even get it out of my mouth good. Carl, welcome back to the program. It's great to have you on as a guest.
Thank you.
And then we have Steve Black, who I think is still, Steve, are you there? Because I'm looking at different screens.
I think so. Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go.
We can hear you. Steve. Awesome.
We can hear you and you can hear us. Wow, this is wonderful technology. Steve is a retired Command Chief, Command Chief, U.S. Army Warrant Officer, who used to fly Bell H-1 Huey helicopters and the Sikorsky UH-6 Blackhawks. Everybody knows the movie Black Hawk Down. Hopefully that wasn't one that Steve had to deal with. Steve also has flown offshore and medevac missions in what's now called the Leonardo, used to be called the Augusta-Westland AW-139 helicopter and the Sikorsky S-76 helicopter. Steve, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you. Great to have you with us. Technical stuff and all. And then we have, and this is where I always get tripped up because I always have a guest who has a name that challenges me, but I'm going to try to get this one right. So this is Diudani Kazumbe. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Okay, not bad. But we can call him Dio. Thank you, Dio, for letting us do that. He's a graduate of Washington, D.C.'s TransSTEM Academy at the Francis Cardozo Education Campus in D.C. He was an active participant in aviation field trips and brown bag luncheons, and is on 2 scholarships from the Aero Club Foundation of Washington. Dio now is a sophomore at Arizona State University. He's always dreamed of becoming a professional pilot. He's in their flight training program, and he's also studying aviation management. And we will hear more about Dio's background, which is a very interesting one. Dio, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. The other aspiring young aviation professional we have is Nico Jackson. Nico is an 11th grader. He's also in the junior ROTC program for the Air Force at his high school. And he literally flies a flight simulator every day and has logged all of his flights. He has accumulated, get this, over 3,650 hours of simulator time. So I think he's kind of serious about flying. I don't know, Maybe.
Yes, sir.
Welcome, Nico, to the show.
Thank you.
So Nico, I'm going to start out with you because you have an interesting story to tell. So you're a student member of the East Coast chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. You've had the privilege of meeting Brigadier General Charles McGee. and his daughter, who runs the flight training program there. You guys did some flying a week or two ago. I think a couple weeks ago, like
Yes,
a couple
sir.
Saturdays ago. And I heard that you just went over to a pilot that was in a kind of a cool aircraft and said, and they offered for you to go up flying. Tell us about that. What kind of airplane was it, and what happened with that?
Well, it was a Stearman, I believe, a ST-17. It was a Stearman
Right.
model aircraft.
The same type of aircraft that the general trained in 70 years ago. Yep.
Yes, sir. And yeah, so when we first pulled up to the parking lot, it's actually funny. I saw her pulling the plane out of the hangar. And I was just like, man, I had my camera with me, so I was just like, man, I really want to take some pictures of that. So we go down there, we sign in. You know, we had to sign in so we can fly. And while we were sitting out there on the ground, she pulled the plane around so it could so she could get some fuel so she could fly it. You know, for a little bit, get some hours on it. And I asked her, first what we talked about the plane. I asked her, the history of it and where it came from. And just before she was about to go flying, I asked if I could, tag along with you before, I had to go fly myself. And she was just like, sure. So it was really, 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 really
Open
exciting.
cockpit. It doesn't get any better than that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that had to be a thrill for you. Well, I'm glad you got that experience, and it probably was kind of even more of a unique experience, considering that was a same type of aircraft that the general had trained in, and all the
Indeed.
Tuskegee Airmen actually.
Yes, sir. It was. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you looking forward to today, Nico, being on this show? We kind of grabbed you only a few days ago to see if you were available, and now here you are, and you're getting ready to talk to some seasoned aviation and aerospace professionals.
Well, I hope to first off gain the knowledge and the information you guys have to offer, because I mean, you guys are exactly where I'd like to be. So I'd really like to gain that information and be able to network and essentially just work out everything that I need to work out to become a pilot, or see what I need to do and just keep going at it and reach my goal. Honestly, I'm just really excited to be here to talk to you guys.
Well, we're very excited to have you here, and we're going to share a lot of information, and you're going to have the opportunity to speak directly with everybody, ask questions and things like that. Let me go ahead and go back to Dio. Dio, tell us a little bit about you. I've said earlier that your situation is unique. You're actually a refugee from Uganda, and you came here how long ago now? 6 years?
6 years, yes.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that and about you getting into flying, into aviation.
So I was born in Democratic Republic of Congo, which is like at the very center of African continent. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
So yeah, this was April 20, 2001, and I lost my parents at a very early age. I was about 3-4 years old, and I had to move in with my grandma. And so a few years later, this was around 2006, there was a lot of civil war going, and my family was part of the people largely affected. But luckily enough, we were able to move to Uganda, which was so close to where we lived, because the city where I grew up from, Goma, at an early age, it's only a few miles away from Uganda. So we were able to actually walk to Uganda, and we were there from when I was 5 or 6 to until 2014, when we were able to come here to the US.
So how did you become interested in aviation?
It's a very interesting story, and I usually say that ride, me going from Uganda to here, was actually a turning point where I looked at myself, and I always ask myself this question from when I was a kid: is what's next? What now? And what happens after this? And I looked at myself. I was thinking. I was like, what do I want to be in the future? Like, what goals do I have set for myself? Because one thing I'm always afraid of is not knowing where I am or where I'm heading, whether physically or mentally. And I was looking at the pilot. The pilot came in from the cockpit down the aisle, And a few minutes later, he went back, and I was like, "That's a cool uniform. I would want to do something like that." And just before takeoff, I was like, "Yep, this is it. I mean, I don't think there's anything else." And from that point, I told myself that if someone ever asked me, "What do you want to be in the future?" I'll tell them I want to be a pilot. And that was the drive of everything I have been able to do in the last 6 years, was based on that statement. I want to be a pilot, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And look where I am.
Well, there you go. Yeah, we'll talk some more about your background in a little bit. I want to share with you guys some of the background of the three professional guests that we have on. We'll start with Lieutenant Commander Holmes. Lieutenant Commander Holmes, you have had one heck of a career already, and you seem to just be warming up.
Well, can you hear me all right as
Yes.
well? Okay. Well, I sure hope I'm just warming up. And it has been a really cool ride this year. I just hit the 15-year mark in the Coast Guard, United States Coast Guard, and
Congratulations.
it's really been a blessing.
Yeah.
I
Tell us how
could
you
go
got
on,
started. How did you get into flying? How did you end up flying Coast Guard helicopters? When did you get interested in flying, and how did that all come about?
It was when I met another Black female pilot who flew for the Coast Guard. So I joined the Coast Guard through a C-SPY, or I'm sorry, through an ROTC type program called C-SPY. That CSPI stands for College Student Pre-Commissioning Initiative. It's a scholarship program. You're a full-time enlisted member of the Coast Guard when you join. You're getting paid, on the 1st and the 15th. You've got the medical, and you're going to school for your last 2 years, and then you get guaranteed officer candidate school right after that. So
Wow.
I attended Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. It's an all-women's school, and I graduated in May of 2007. I had already been in the Coast Guard 2 years, and I
What did you
wasn't
study?
due.
I'm sorry, what did you
Psychology.
study?
Psychology.
Psychology. Okay.
Uh-huh.
That
And
might come in
because
handy.
I aged out of the foster care program, so at that point in my life, I was thinking I wanted to be a therapist or a counselor in my own group home. So that was the reason for that. And
Okay.
so I graduated in May, but I wasn't due to go to officer candidate school into the next January of '08. So I had some time to do some Coast Guard related activities. And I was underway on one of our ships sailing from Seattle to Japan. And it was really neat. I thought I wanted to be a ship driver. And while I was underway, the operations officer said, "Hey, do you know what you want to do?" I said, "Yeah, driving a ship. This is so cool." And he said, "Well, have you ever thought about flying?" And I said, "Well, don't you have to be really smart to do that, or an engineer, or go to the Air Force Academy?" And they said, "No, we've seen you doing hard work here on the boat. You should look into it, because right now the Coast Guard only has one Black female pilot." And that
Wow.
was, towards the end of 2007, coming from Spelman College, a historically Black college full of women. I was just floored by this. So I looked her up. Her name was Janine Menzie. She was stationed in Clearwater, Florida, flying C-130s at the time. So I sent her an email that night, and I said, "I heard you were the only Black pilot female pilot in the Coast Guard. Is this true? This is incredible. Can I meet you?" And she said, "Well, if you can get the Coast Guard to, give you orders once you pull in from the boat from Seattle to Clearwater, I'll show you the ropes." And literally at that
Wow.
point in my life, I had never formally met a pilot. I'd never met one. I'd never thought about flying. So the first pilot that I, really meet is this Black woman from Jamaica. She had been flying before she joined the Coast Guard. She was a flight instructor before the Coast Guard, and she took me up on my first flight. And ever since then, I just knew from meeting her and seeing her that I could at least give it a shot. And that's what I did. And I went to officer candidate school, and right after that, I went straight to flight school at Naval Air Station Pensacola. They teach us how to fly airplanes first, flew
First, right.
Cessnas and T-34 Turbomentor. Right now they're flying the T-6. And then I also learned how to fly helicopters while I was there.
So this is what we want the young people that are watching, including the two that are on the program, to hear. There's so many different paths that you guys take to get to where you are, that we all take, all of us that are professionals in the industry. And you had never even thought about flying, had never actually been in a helicopter before.
No,
And
never.
and so what was that like when you first got to Pensacola and started flight training? And how did that transition to you finally, being able to fly a helicopter? And then apparently you're very good at it.
Well, well, it's terrifying, right? It's exciting and it's terrifying at the same time. When you first get to flight school, you do introductory flight training, basically, where they want to make sure you won't crash, you don't get airsick, and you kind of get the basics of flying. So you're flying in a Cessna or a small single-engined airplane,
So
and you get
not
about
crashing is a requirement.
no, no. I mean, I nearly did. I nearly did. I've got to tell you, but so you get about 10 hours of time with an instructor, and then you have to go out and do a solo. And so I remember, and this is one of the terrifying moments because flying with the instructor, I was doing totally fine. I was icing my landings, everything was smooth. And then I get there on my solo, and you have to fly at least 50 nautical miles out. And I get to an airport. I see a bunch of guys who own their own planes kind of on the side of the runway. And I'm just saying, aim point, airspeed, flaps, I'm just going through everything in my mind. And everything is looking good. I've got the runway alignment, but then I just hit the nose wheel so hard. And then I porpoise like this
Oh
all the
my
way down the
gosh.
runway. And it was so violent.
Oh my
I
goodness.
taxied off of the active and I had to get out. I just knew I broke something or it wouldn't fly again. So I shut it down. I had to like cool off, I was panicking and I'm looking under the plane, looking all over, like I had to break something. And then the guys that had seen me, they came over and they seemed so surprised, like, where did this, young Black girl come from in this plane? And she almost killed herself. But anyway, so I had to tell myself, hey, just shake it off. It's fine. It happens. It's
And
your first
persist
porpoise.
and
But,
keep moving forward.
and then I started the plane back up. I got back in the pattern and I did a couple more good ones. And
There you go.
so anyway,
And the
I
rest
kept,
was history, right?
and the rest was history. That's right.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny you say that. We'll come back about talking about a few more things in terms of your background. But the soloing, the quick thing I'll tell you guys, I soloed at 9 hours. And when the instructor stepped out I was in a Cessna 150, a little two-seater. And when the instructor stepped out of the plane and had a handheld and he was like, okay, go fly, have a good time. As I was taxiing, my right leg started shaking uncontrollably. I mean, it was like, I was like, I'm not even gonna make it down to the end of the runway to take off, the end of the taxiway to take off on the runway because my leg was shaking. And then all of a sudden I pulled on center line and was clear to take off. And then my whole body just, like a Zen moment, just calmed down. And then I did what I had to do. But I think we all can tell a story about our first solo or, something related to it and that type of thing. Very cool to hear that from you. Steve Black. Steve,
Yes, sir.
you've been flying helicopters for a long time.
Yes, sir.
You started out flying them in the Army, but how did that come about for you to actually become a pilot, helicopter pilot?
My initial reason for wanting to fly was my aunt taking me to the airport when I was a young kid and me seeing the planes, and they were huge. You see them in the sky and they're tiny. And so I'm holding my aunt's hand and she asked if you want to be a pilot. So of course I did at that time. And and it's history since then. My buddy and I would go to the airport when we were younger, got a license, 16 years old to drive. And at that time you could get closer to the runway, the airport, and you just watch the planes come in. So we're kind of nerds in that sense. We had a Bell 222 that'd fly around the neighborhood, and we'd always gawk at that thing. So that was the start. And then in high school, 11th grade, recruiter showed up and said something about a warrant officer flight training, and I said, could I do it? He said yes. So I made the application, was qualified, non-select, and that was due to my academics, and I did not apply myself like I should have in high school. So I had the aptitude, but at that time, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. Anyway, the recruiter told me that most pilots actually come in from within the military. So I joined as a crew chief. I was a Chinook crew chief for 6.5 years, crew chief and a flight engineer. Finally got accepted to flight school in 93, and there I flew Hueys and Blackhawks, and then had a career flying in the military.
What was that like? What was that like to be a crew chief for that period of time when you knew what you really wanted to do was be up in the cockpit? how did you deal with that? What's your perspective on that?
Sure. I was enamored with aviation. So although I was maintaining an aircraft, I was also a part of the crew. So I was flying. So, if I had to go back and do it again, I would do the same thing, but I would apply myself academically in high school. But I wouldn't change that for anything. I wouldn't take those crew chief years away for anything because it taught me so much. It actually made flight school substantially easier than it would have if I hadn't done that. So.
Well, and because you knew what it was like to be in the back and maintaining an aircraft, et cetera, and so forth, as a pilot, you can appreciate what the crews do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and so was there much of a transition for you from, how many years did you fly in the Army before you transitioned to civilian?
About 18 years.
Okay. So was there much of a transition to fly civilian?
Yes, it was. I think the military has a little bit more money to pay for your school, whereas what I found on the civil side is, time is money, and we want to get you to where we want to go. But I didn't feel, as thoroughly trained as I did in the military. So I had to kind of do a little OJT, and I got comfortable flying offshore and doing that fairly quickly. That wasn't such a big deal, but I expected, CRM on the civil side, we talk about it a lot, but I expected a little more at that time. And maybe in helicopters, it's not as defined as it is in the fixed wing side. I mean, the rotary wing side kind of falls behind the fixed wing side. So there's a few things I had to get used to. I was a tactical pilot. And there they don't fly tactics. So in the simulator, we had to do a confined area approach. Well, there's only one way I know how to do it, and that's low level and in the trees. Well, I made a turn before 300 feet, and another instructor was training in the S-76, and he sat there and yelled at me. You can yell at me if you want to. I don't know. These are new conditions for me. So just tell me, and I can generally get it.
Gotcha. Yeah. That is an adjustment to make. I want to give the aspiring young aviation professionals a chance to ask some questions, but before I do that, let me talk to Carl for a second. Carl, you've also had a unique path. You actually weren't even thinking about aerospace in the early days. So, but you have an engineering mind. So tell us about you and how you got into engineering and how that translated to what you do now.
Yeah, my name is Carl Comliff. I'm actually an electrical engineer manager now at Northrop Grumman. I actually got, when I was pretty young, I had an uncle that was a electrical engineer, and he was the coolest guy, had really nice car and was just real cool and down to earth. And in my mind, that's how all engineers were. I mean, there wasn't the concept of being a nerd as an engineer, right? So I decided pretty young that I wanted to be an engineer, and he could actually fix all kinds of things. Every time I had some sort of electronic toy that would break, my uncle would fix it for us and so forth. And so that's what really got me the interest. And then as I kind of, went into school and such, got very interested in math and science, was really good in math and science. And so it was obviously kind of the natural path for me to go into engineering. And then I chose electrical engineering because that was what I had the most interest in. So I got my first job in the field of electronics when I was in high school, or just after high school. I actually worked at doing electronics assembly. So kind of started out at kind of the lowest tier of the electrical engineering field. From there, went on to become a technician when I was in junior college, managed an electronics lab, taught some classes on the side as well, and then went to San Diego State where I got my electrical engineering degree. And at that point, I was really, unlike you guys, I liked aviation, but I thought, yeah, maybe one day I'll try and be a pilot as a hobby and stuff. And I have a story as to why I didn't choose aviation, and Vince is an integral part of that. So maybe I'll tell you guys later if.
Oh shoot! What I do? No,
but ended up, through some friends and contacts I had made as a result of being, when I was in college, I was actually the chairman of the National Society of Black Engineers, and because that made numerous contacts. And actually had some friends that were working at TRW at the time in Los Angeles, and submitted a resume to them, and got kind of called up to go work there, which was really kind of a change in career. And that was actually an aerospace company, But up until that point, when I got that job, I wanted to be in the automotive industry, work in electronics for some sort of race team. And because all the companies that did that were in the Midwest where it was freezing cold, I decided not to do that, being kind of, growing up in high school in San Diego. And so ended up, pretty much for weather purposes, going to work at TRW, and 25 years later, I'm still there. Now we're north of Grumman, of course, but that was pretty much my path as to going there. But I think one thing that, Lieutenant Commander Holmes, her story kind of resonates with me, is, it's because I saw somebody that I was able to look up to that was doing what I wanted to do one day,
Exactly.
just like she saw the pilot with the Coast Guard. Because if you see somebody doing what you do, you can more visualize it. And that was actually what kind of helped me pave my way to going into it as well.
Sure. And that's one of the things that, we're trying to do with the program today. As an example, giving these two young men that are here today an opportunity to interact with professionals like you guys who have been part of this and have been in the industry as professionals for a long time. And it's, it's not always that these, I want to call them kids, but these young folks have had that opportunity. So speaking of that, I'm going to turn it to you, Dio, and to you, Nico, either one of you guys. I'm sure you guys have some questions you'd like to ask our guests.
Yeah,
Indeed.
I do. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna ask. So what did you guys know what exactly you wanted to major in when you guys were going through college, and what would be the best things to major in to get to, where you guys were, being a pilot or having that as a career?
That is a really great question because there's a lot of answers to it. Go ahead, guys. Anybody?
I guess I can start. My first 2 years at Spelman, I was a biochemistry major, and then I changed it and ended up graduating with a degree in psychology, and my master's is in management. So really, I think it just comes down to just pure will and performance. If you want to be a pilot, of course you could be do something in aeronautics or science, physics, things like that. But if that isn't your major or your educational background, that doesn't mean that those opportunities are off the table for you.
Yeah, I think that's really great to point that out because I had some female pilot guests, military pilot guests on several shows ago. One of them was a history major, one of them was a molecular biology major, and one of them was an English lit major. But they're all, flying these great missions in the various branches of the service. Did you or Carl, you guys want to chime in on that question?
I'll just say,
Go, Steve.
go ahead, Carl.
Go, Steve.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, again, I'll just say, I'll piggyback off the Lieutenant Commander military term. As far as the specific degree in aviation, I don't believe that that's a big, most job applications, you don't see so much a specific college education. They'll just say a bachelor's degree, and that's not even a requirement. They set that aside for experience. So if you have a set amount of experience, they'll bypass the college education. So I'd say don't let that be a hindrance, no matter what degree you get. Unless you get a specific degree flying, in my opinion, I don't think it's as important as people place it to be. I think if you go that route, that doesn't hurt. It certainly doesn't. But if you're not, I don't think that's a hindrance, in my opinion.
Yeah. Carl, you have some things about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different for my career because definitely as an engineer, the guy that's sort of designing aspects of a plane or designing aspects of a satellite, spacecraft and such, you do need the specific technical expertise. Although there are people who sort of, start college as, kind of an English lit degree and such, and decide, later in life that they want to go back to school for engineering and such. And then there's also engineers that decide they want to be pilots. I mean, I work with quite a few engineers that actually are kind of, as a hobby more so and not as a career, but are pilots on the side. one engineer that I work with, he actually has built his own helicopter out of a kit and such, and flies all the time out of Compton Airport over near where I live. And so I would say it doesn't always matter what you choose in heading to a path, as long as you try to kind of excel at that thing, right? So if you're going to major in psychology, then you make sure and knock it out, get good grades. If you're going to, go straight to the military out of high school, just try and excel and be the best. Because when you have that, it's hard to sort of deny if you have a capability, because people can not like you for whatever reason, but they can never deny what your capabilities are. And as long as you're able to sort of prove those capabilities, then you're one step ahead as far as getting a seat at the table.
Lieutenant Commander Holmes, I saw you nodding very much in agreement. That resonate with you?
No, absolutely. Especially the part where Mr. Call talked about nobody being able to deny that. Once you've got that piece of paper and you've got that, that expertise kind of backed by your university, nobody can deny that, because again, I mean, even I'm sure it's no different just for the Coast Guard, but you may find yourself in situations where people just don't like you, and just based off of that, maybe they can make it a little bit more difficult to get to that next step. But when you've got a background more similar to Mr. Carl's, it makes it a lot tougher. And I'm just curious, sir, the pilot out of Compton Airport, is that Robin Petgrave you're talking about?
Probably
No,
is.
no, it's not actually, but I've met him before because
Okay.
through events. Yeah.
I know Robin really well. We can talk about that offline.
Yeah, that's
Robin and I go way back.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
actually helped him form the Tomorrow's Aeronautical Museum that I understand you're now a board member of.
Well, I haven't lately, now that with this new job, but yeah, I think I met him around 2010 or so, and he's just been a wonderful person, and we've done a lot of events out there at the Compton Airport. We used to fly the 65 down there to the airport, and we'd have a bunch of Tuskegee events, and
Right. Yeah, he
just
does a
good
lot
guy.
of things for the young people. He's been that way for a long time.
Yep.
Not to digress any further into that, because you and I could probably share a lot of stories with that. Dio, you had a question for our professional guest.
Yes. I have a question about having, what is life like having more than just one career path or one passion? Could you speak a little bit more about that? I've always asked myself, because I'm an author, I enjoy writing books, but I also want to have some sort of career, anything in aviation, well, mainly an airline pilot. But I also want to write, and I don't want that to go away because this is a gift. It's something I think I was born with. So yeah, would you talk a little bit more about that?
Anybody want to chime
Yeah,
in on that?
I'll take a stab at that one. Definitely, it's if you have various hobbies or various things you're good at, or affinities towards different things, it helps to make you kind of a well-rounded individual, right? I mean, we work with a lot of people in our jobs, in our careers, but rarely, at least for me, rarely do I bond with a coworker or such based on what we do when we're at work, right? I mean, we're all there, we're all building spacecraft and this and that. And so there's kind of nothing special about that from the standpoint of who you build as your network. But the fact that one coworker may be interested in photography, maybe one's a writer on the side. I mean, those are the things that kind of really back up who we are as people, because what we do from 9 to 5 or, whatever your work hours don't completely define who we are. It's sort of, because you only spend about, a third of your day at work, right? So kind of who you are when the lights at work kind of shut down, really help define you and make you better at what you do during business hours and such. So, if you love to write. I mean, there may be an aspect of you writing for a magazine in aerospace one day, or working kind of, the multimedia side of it, as well as being a pilot. These are all sort of skills that I think you have in your toolbox, and you got to keep all those tools sharp. So, so I definitely encourage you to try and be a jack of as many trades as you can, because you never know which one will be the one that will kind of elevate you to your dream.
Yeah, Lieutenant Commander Holmes, do you want to chime in on that too? In this regard, I mean, you have flown helicopters for quite a while, and now you're actually sitting in an office as a liaison to the Senate for the Coast Guard. That's a bit of a transition. What's your perspective on that?
So for us in the military, it's a little bit different. So for example, if my passion were to, hey, I want to go back and be a ship driver now at this point in my career, or maybe I want to fly fixed wing, that's not as easy as a transition as it was in the beginning. Once the military has invested the training and the money into you year after year, they kind of want you to stay with that one thing, to be an expert in your craft, so that you can come back and be leadership. So one day I can maybe go back and be the executive officer, the commanding officer of my own air station. But one thing that the military, specifically the Coast Guard, has allowed me to do, things like being a White House fellow. They let me take a break from flying for a year. I was a White House fellow. I got to work at NASA for a year. Very cool. Now I'm in a staff tour that's, after about 3 operational tours, you go into a staff tour where you learn how to lead. You learn to see kind of what happens behind the curtains, how the sausage is made. So I'm lucky enough to be working in congressional affairs right now as a deputy Senate liaison, working with all the senators and their staff, and trying to move the commandant, the leader of the Coast Guard, all of his priorities, trying to move those forward, trying to make sure we get an authorization, appropriations every year, we get the funding we need, and all those things. So it's a 2-year tour, really, really neat opportunity for me. And I'm looking forward to taking everything that I'm learning from this job back to aviation and back to the service when I'm done.
So I think one of the common denominators is that a lot of the aspiring young aviation professionals, they don't really always realize that while you have this goal, you may do another path or another turn either after that goal or before that goal. So I mean, and all of you have kind of alluded to that in one way or another. And the positions that you're in now, I'm sure when you were flying for the Coast Guard down in Miami, I would be surprised if you said, "Oh yeah, one day I was going to be sitting in DC as a liaison." Am I right about that?
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought it at all.
Yeah. So,
But I want to just echo again what Mr. Carl mentioned about just rounding yourself out. You never know, like,
right.
I could, God forbid, something could happen to my vision, or something could happen and maybe I can't fly. And so when you have this other hobby and craft that you're continuing to perfect over time, I mean, it's a perfect segue to that next step in life. I'll maybe retired here in less than 5 years, and if I were a writer all this time that I was in the Coast Guard, maybe I could easily pick that up as a second profession. So I think you should continue to write and become the best writer that you can, because like Carl said, you never know how it'll pay you back in the end.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And so in talking with and answering Dio's question about that, Dio, there's a lot of opportunity out there in terms of mixing your profession, so to speak. It just depends on the individual, how much drive you have, and then where those opportunities lie as you move forward with the things that you want to do. I happen to know from reading your background that you have some entrepreneurial spirit in you. You talk about writing. You've already authored 2 books, which, I don't know how many of the rest of us can say we've got a couple of books, at Barnes and Noble or whatever, but congratulations on that, by the way. For doing that at such a young age. You're just getting started. But did we answer your question about that in terms of what you're wanting to do as you pursue flying along with these other talents and interests that you have?
Yes,
Okay.
you did.
Okay. Nico, you've been sitting there patiently. Did you have another question for our guests?
Oh, well, actually, another question just popped up in my head as what Ms. Holmes was saying. I mean, for you guys, like she said, what the future could hold for you, after your profession. What do you guys, after your profession, what do you guys plan on, doing as far as, after your current?
So, what's next?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Let's see, I have a 500,000 hobbies. And so,
That's
you know,
all?
so once I don't have to go to work every day, I will get to spend more time sailing, you know, more time with my photography stuff, more time model railroading, you know, racing cars. I mean, all that kinds of things. There's plenty of stuff out there that I would be doing if I didn't have to, you know, pay a mortgage and things like that. So,
Do you think you've reached the pinnacle of your career, in other words, at 25 years now?
I think I have. I kind of the next step would be to, you know, become a director and then VP type thing after that. But I'm at the point, I think, where I don't want to give up that much of my work-life balance any longer. You know, especially with, you know, COVID and such, and, you know, amount of, you know, fellow Americans we've lost. I mean, none of us know when, you know, life is going to expire on us, right? Or our loved ones. And I find that at the end of the day, it's not that, you know, PowerPoint presentation or that that I worked on, or that budget that I worked on at work, that really have, you know, those things are interesting, and they're fun in some cases, and they're necessary. But a lot of times, you know, those aren't the things that when I think of, you know, the sum of my life, that I, you know, wish I had done more of, right? I mean, it's the, you know, spending time with the family, going on vacations, you know, kind of doing those hobbies that you like. Those are the things that I really think bring me, you know, joy in my life. And so definitely, you know, those are the things I want to, you know, spend more time doing after.
Yeah. On the other hand, Lieutenant Commander Holmes, at the beginning of the program, you said you were just warming up.
I think you said that. I don't
Yeah,
know.
Vince said that.
Okay, I said it for you.
Well, yeah, you know, there's so much out there. And like I said, I joined the Coast Guard when I was in college, end of my sophomore year. And so there's just a lot going on. And I've thought about learning how to sail. I've thought about just moving to Belize and opening my own tiki hut and selling like conch and cocktails and stuff like that. I really enjoy doing things like this and outreach and talking to young people just about life and overcoming adversities and things like that. I'd like to write a book just like Dio. I really like spin and cycle. And so I've even thought about being a spin instructor, you know. So, you know, I don't know. But the work-life balance would be something that's very important to me. I mean, flying, just like all the guests here, a lot of the work that we've done, you know, over time it can wear on you, and it can be taxing and stressful at points. And so I think I'd be looking for something a little bit more relaxed, I guess.
Steve, how about you? You've had a full military career. You've been flying in the civilian world. What are your thoughts about this?
Yes, sir. As far as flying is concerned, what I'll probably do now, instead of chasing you young guys up the ladder, is go out and train as a CFI at one of the local schools. At this point, I don't want to be on a schedule, a bit more laid back. I don't want to be tied to a schedule and climbing a ladder again so much. So you'll probably see me next as that salty guy at a flight school, old guy who appears not to have too much motivation, which is not necessarily true. It's just kind of been there and done that. So I need something a little bit more low key. Kind of work my own schedule a little bit.
That's actually really great, because training, teaching new pilots is something that's very much needed, and that's actually going to grow, because while we're in a little bit of a setback because of COVID-19, the industry is in a desperate need for pilots. You guys, Nico and Dio, guys have a huge future and opportunity with it, because as soon as we get past this COVID-19 pandemic, it'll go back to where it was just prior, which was a desperate need for pilots, mechanics, avionics techs, just about everybody in the industry. And then the space industry is exploding. Bad term, but it's growing dramatically. So, but you know, Nico and Dio, you guys, so Dio, you're a sophomore at Arizona State University, and Nico, you're a junior in high school. So you guys have a bright future ahead of you, but you did hit a roadblock this year with the COVID-19. What's your guys' perspective on it in terms of how it's affected you and how you're looking at it at this point? Either one of you.
Like COVID really affected me a lot from when things got really serious. I remember my last ever flight was my pre-solo flight back in March. I had my solo flight scheduled for 2 days. 2 days later, and then I found out I had to leave for spring. We had a trip to California for spring break. I told my instructor, you know what? Instead of flying right now and rushing, let me just fly back. Let me just fly when I come back in a week. I was to fly home for 2 days during the spring break. I came home and my mom was like, you know what, Dio? I think you should cancel your flight back. It was a 2-day trip that turned into a 5-month trip because school suddenly turned everything online. This was after spring break, late March. They were like, no, all the classes are going to be on Zoom, and we may or may not come back for the fall 20 semester. In my head, I'm like, am I even gonna fly? Will I even solo? Because if I were to take long, I would need remedial flights. You know how ATP is very strict, and so I didn't know how things would end. I was like, can I just fly back? I was like, no, we're in quarantine. You can't fly. I was like, okay. And so I stayed here throughout the second part of the spring semester, throughout the summer, and then went back in August. And then my flight school had some things going on, and they were closing and opening. And so I was like, maybe I should fly in the spring semester again. So now I'm going back to flying. I haven't soloed yet due to what happened, COVID. And so
now you got to play a little bit of catch up, right?
Yes. Yeah. Those remedial flights, because they cost a lot of money. That's why I didn't want to do them. So that and classes, as far as classes, pretty much all my classes were remote. We had an option to go in person for some of them, but it was just better to do a remote because you never know who you're going to run into. Not every one of the students at ASU, especially the campus I go to, stays on campus. It's a relatively small campus within a big school. It's Polytechnic. So I chose to do everything remote, and the experience is kind of different from being in person. Well, it's very different because, and the grades reflected that too. They weren't as good as the first 2 semesters in college. So yeah, it really did affect in many kinds of ways.
Yeah.
But
so
on the other hand,
go ahead.
yeah. On the other hand, I've been able to do a lot throughout quarantine, being home for most of it, being indoors. I've been able to read a lot, write a lot, explore other skills. I actually just got into trading stocks this year, and I was being in quarantine. I got the opportunity to read a lot, so I'm expanding my spectrum of what I would be able to do in the future, things that I want to try. So bad things came with COVID and other good things.
Yeah, it sounds like a mix of things. You have any stock tips? Just kidding. So you guys have both you and what was I going to say to you? I know. I wanted to mention this in terms of you, Dio. So Dio, you got involved with the Aero Club Foundation of Washington here in Washington, D.C., which has been, you've actually gotten 2 scholarships from them. Can you tell us real quick how you got involved and then what the process was like to get that kind of support from them?
As far as involving with them, this was part of TransSTEM at Cardozo. I believe Cardozo is the only school with TransSTEM Academy, and they're connected with Aero Club. We would have luncheons about twice a year, something like that. And being part of TransSTEM, we had an opportunity to participate in these Aero Club luncheons where they would have people from military talk to students, aspiring students, those who want to go to the military or just career in general,
Right.
advice about life and a lot of different things. And I got to meet the president, who Miss Rose, who connected me with you a few days ago. So she was connected with a Transtem director, and when I got to apply for the scholarship in 2019, earlier last year before I graduated, so she knew about me, she knew my story, and I mean, not to say that that increased my success probability of winning the scholarship, but she was aware of who I was, and she was happy when I got the scholarship the first time, and I didn't know I would be able to get it the second time. But I mean, even people who were I was competing against were also part of the luncheon, so I wasn't really the only one. And the
Sure.
second time I applied, I didn't know I would get the scholarship. I actually almost forgot about it. I got an email like 3 months later after applying. They're like, "Oh, you got the scholarship." It's like, wow, it's impressive. But the things I needed to get the scholarships were two recommendation letters. One, when I was in high school back in 12th grade, I believe one came from my advisor or counselor, and then one from a teacher. I was lucky enough to have a letter from the principal, so I used that in a few of the scholarships I applied for, and most the ones I used the principal letter recommendation. I got pretty much most of them. I would recommend it for Nico when he's applying for scholarships.
Exactly. I was just getting ready to say that. I was glad you shared your story, because I think it's really important for you guys and everybody watching to know that there are a lot of scholarships out there, and some of them are really good scholarships for both flight training and for academics and that type of thing. And they come from different programs, associations, et cetera. And the more you're involved in knowing about that, in other words, involved as a student member of an aviation association like Aircraft Owner and Pilots Association, National Business Aviation Association, et cetera, and things like that, EAA, Experimental Aircraft Association, and then the local ones like the Aero Club Foundation of Washington. The more you are involved in that, the more you'll find out about these opportunities that exist. And as a matter of fact, AOPA is giving flight training scholarships out for 2021, and they just announced it recently, and I had shared that with Nico. You might even qualify for that for the flight training portion of your stuff, Dio. So you may want to look into that. I can touch base with you about that offline if you're not familiar with AOPA. So I wanted to mention that. Nico, I wanted to give you a chance if you had. We're running out of time, but before we start to wrap things up, did you have any other questions for our guests?
Really, you guys really touched on the things that I'd like to know and understand. So I'd say it's sufficient enough. Yeah.
Okay, good. That's great to hear. How about you, Dio? We'll give you one more chance if you had any other questions.
I don't think I have a question.
Okay, so this is great. It gives us a few minutes because I wanted to let each of our professional guests give a word of advice about what they recommend for you guys moving forward. And also, you guys, we have enough time if you want to share briefly an influence on your life that made a difference. You kind of started off that with Lieutenant Commander Holmes about connecting with, and then meeting the African-American female pilot that seemed to kind of influence the track that you started to take in your career. So I'll start with you, and then we'll move through everybody else.
Yeah, she was she's a commander now, Commander Janine Menzie. We're still good friends. She's been a mentor to me throughout my career. So that's the first piece of advice I would offer up, is to have people like that in your circle, to have the mentors, have the people close by that you can call when things get challenging, because there will be challenges, because that's just how life is. And so I remember specifically being at my first unit, and I had some challenges going on there, and I remember, and it got pretty bad. And it was a Friday afternoon, and I left work. I called Janine. She didn't pick up. I left a message and I said, Janine, I just want you to be the first to know that I'm walking away from aviation. On Monday, I'm turning in my wings because I've had enough, and I could, be working somewhere else and making the same amount of money. And she called me back on Sunday and she said, look, I'm not trying to convince you one way or the other, but if you're not absolutely 100% sure about it, just don't do anything. And so Monday morning, I get to work. I'm in my dress uniform, not my flight suit, because I'm thinking I'm really gonna go, walk over to the captain's office and tell him, I quit, or you can have these wings back. And then, and then I just remembered, I said, LaShonda, you went to the same flight school as everybody else. You earn these wings the same way that everybody else did. So just stick with it. And so those are the two pieces. If you're not 100% sure about a decision, maybe just take a moment to think about it, or to lean on someone else, and definitely keep those mentors close by.
Great, thank you. Steve, have a minute or so.
No matter what career path you choose, there are going to be challenges. And often when you get to where you want to be, you'll find that pushback times and a lot of other things take some of the bright lights out of what you wanted to do. But what else would you be doing? If, in my case, I love flying. I really do. I would say self-described attention deficit disorder, but I'm flying, really my brain is, I could be fat, dumb, and happy, and my brain is still working, unlike some other times. So it's actually a good job for me, but there are always going to be challenges no matter what you want to do. And even when you get to where you want to go, if you want to be a fireman, a police officer, I did an Explorer program, lights and sirens are fun, but most of the police work is not lights and sirens and chasing bad guys, but in my case, what else would I want to do? Not much. So just continue to move forward if that's what you want to do, and understand, you're gonna win some, you're gonna lose some, but keep your eye on the prize, and you'll get to where you want to go, Lord's willing.
Great, thank you. Carl, take us home.
Let's see, for me growing up, like I've mentioned before, my uncle that was an electrical engineer, motivated me for that field. But also my dad was key, because one thing he always told us that, he doesn't care what we end up doing in life as long as we try to be our best at it. And you may not end up being the best, but the fact that you're trying to be the best is going to elevate you. So I definitely say to both Nico and Dio to just try to be the best at what you do. And, like the Lieutenant Colonel said, definitely, go out there and make your networks with folks. You definitely have to also learn from your mistakes. Steve talked about, kind of facing adversity and difficulties, and things are going to be hard. I never learned in my life a good lesson from anything that was easy. It's the things that were hard that taught me pretty much 99% of what I know. And it's those things that sort of toughen your skin and make you capable of going through even more difficult things, because sometimes life gets easy, but sometimes it gets more difficult. And if you never have to face adversity, when it comes, it's going to hit you hard. So if you can basically get through those little hurdles along the way, it's just going to make you tougher for when you hit that big wall. You're going to be able to jump over it while everybody else is going to be, crashing into it. So, and then lastly, I just want to say, it's been a pleasure meeting, both you two guys, Nico and Dio. I mean, you guys are really kind of the future, and I think it's in good hands after meeting you guys. And definitely take off and keep fulfilling the legacy.
Thank you very much, Carl. Thank you for those great words, and thank all of you for your feedback and your interaction and comments about everything, your input. Really appreciate everybody being on the program today. We're in the holiday season. We're in the middle of the COVID-19, and everybody's also just busy with life and work and that type of thing. So I appreciate, Lieutenant Commander Holmes squeezing us in between your meetings, and you too, Carl, doing the same thing, because I know you're getting ready to roll to a meeting any second now. But as Carl said, very happy to have you, Nico, and Dio. Thank you so much for letting us use your nickname, for being on the program and having this opportunity to talk directly with some some outstanding professionals that we have in the industry, who've had major accomplishments and that type of thing. Everybody have a great holiday. And again, thanks for being on All Things Aviation. I'm Vince Mickens. You guys take care.
Take care.
Take care.
Stay
And
safe
Merry
out there.
Christmas to everyone.
Christmas.
Thank you so much.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good
Bye.